Evening. Welcome to #GotMoney. I'm Elizabeth Jackson. Great show for you this evening. As you know, we do Got Money Legal, and a member of my team who I just admire and respect so much, and who's also extremely funny, always winning, is Melanie Heffernan. Did I get that right?
Seriously, still?
3 years. Like really Heffernan.
Repeat after me.
Go.
Nan.
Heffernan. Melanie Heffernan. Southeast Lawyers. Hey, good evening, Melanie. Welcome to Got Money. Mate, how are you?
I'm pretty good. Like every other small business at the moment, you know, just hanging in there.
Interesting times, eh?
Very interesting. A lot of things going on in the legal industry as the government passes new legislation.
Every minute? Are they passing it every minute?
People think politicians don't do anything, but the raft of stuff they churn out that we have to read, massive.
So talk to me about what you're noticing in COVID as a solicitor. Unpack that a little bit for us.
Sure. So I think the number one inquiry that we're having at the moment is either from tenants or landlords about commercial leases. So the question is from tenants, of course, what sort of help can I get? I can't afford to pay the rent. I'm trying to juggle all of my different bills. How can I get some assistance? And the second question is usually from landlords saying, my tenant has approached me. What is my obligation in terms of rent reductions, reductions to outgoings, those sorts of questions. Now, we've recently had some legislation passed by the Victorian government, so we've got a bit more guidance now about where we're going, what our obligations are. And there is a bit of misinformation going on out there because have this conflict.
How unusual, this misinformation. That's why I get you on, because it's like a dog. It's like a dog fight out there. So in terms of the tenancy managers, no, in terms of the tenant, do they have any rights? Do the tenants have any rights?
Okay, so the right to access a lot of these reductions is based around whether your business is considered a small to medium business. So there's a few different tests in there, but basically if your business turns over less than $50 million in a financial year, you're in that space. And then there's a second qualification, which is that you're eligible for JobKeeper and that you have actually applied and are getting JobKeeper. So if you tick off on those two, then you are in the space that you can capitalise on these concessions at the moment.
So what does a concession look like? How much are they saving?
So landlords are required to act in good faith and to negotiate with you. I know, yes. But tenants are also obliged to do the same.
Okay.
So basically what we're seeing is reductions on rental in two different ways. So the legislation basically says that for 6 months from the 25th, was it 25th? I think it was, no, 29th of March until the 29th of September is the period in which these provisions apply. And if you're eligible for the JobKeeper and you're the small to medium business, then you can obtain a waiver in rent. And it's a waiver that you never have to pay back, basically. So it's really good news for small to medium businesses that they can access that amount. So the amount that you're looking at being able to access is, generally speaking, what we're seeing, whatever your drop that you've applied for JobKeeper with, so say your business is down 35%, you're asking your landlord for a 35% reduction on your rent. Now, the landlord is obliged, whatever reduction it is, obliged to give you half of that reduction as an absolute waiver that they can never recoup. And then what we're seeing is a lot of landlords giving the other half of that reduction as essentially a deferred rental that you will have to pay back, but it will be amortized over the course of the next 24 months. Or if your lease doesn't run for 24 months, then to the end of the term that it's running for. So that's a pretty big win for small business, but small business just needs to be aware that the legislation in waiver is very clear that you can get this 50% waiver on the JobKeeper amount, but you don't have to be granted a deferral.
Let's go back to that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got a restaurant and you're shut and you're not producing any income and you're getting job keepers, that 30%, it might as well be, I mean, it's just a fallacy that if you've got no money coming in, you're not going to be able to pay anything. So what happens to those tenants?
In the retail industry has really been hit by this, obviously, and they may have a 100% drop in revenue because they've had to close if they can't do any takeaway or something like that. So it's not just for them, it's not 30%. Their drop off that has enabled them to claim JobKeeper is 100%. So they can approach their landlords and say, right, I've had this drop off and I've been forced to shut. Therefore, I want a reduction on rent, and 50% of that reduction has to be a waiver. So in those sorts of cases, they should be in a position where they're waiving, the landlord is waiving 50% of the rent. And then the other 50% can be deferred. Well, if it's agreed. So whatever your percent is for JobKeeper, that's the percent that you're approaching your landlord about getting a reduction or a deferral on. So it varies from business to business.
Is there, so in reference to the owner of the property, can they object to that, or is it law? Do they have a leg to stand on?
Some of it's in law. It's in law that whatever percent you claim, so say your rent is $1,000 a week and your business has dropped off by 40%, you can go to your landlord and say, my business has dropped off by 40%. I want $200 a week waived, and I want $200 a week deferred. Now, the landlord can come back and say, right, I'm only going to waive 20% and I'm not giving you any deferral. But there's at least a bit of saving there. On the flip side, for landlords, if your tenants approach you on this basis, you should be saying, right, show me that you are a small to medium business. So a lot of landlords have been requesting like a profit and loss or a balance sheet to see what the turnover is. And show to me that you've applied for JobKeeper and the percentage that you have applied for. So there is a bit of due diligence there for landlords. Landlords don't have to automatically turn around and say, yes, you get it. As a tenant, you've got to follow the process, and as a landlord, you need to be getting these things from your tenants. So that's the first step with retail and commercial leasing, is that there are these discounts, but the government has also put another package, well, part of the same package is that if you fail to pay rent under the lease in accordance with your lease for the next 6 months, that's not considered a breach of the lease. So your landlord can't boot you out for that.
Wow.
Yeah.
God.
Your landlord can't dip into your bond to make up any amounts that you are behind on. Your landlord can't charge you interest on the deferred amount or the waived amount. a lot of people who are operating out of shopping centres have mandated hours. The shopping's in their lease. It will say the shopping centre's open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. You have to work during those hours and be open. If you've been ordered to be closed, then you don't have to follow that. So like beauty parlours who can't operate, they don't have to have their shop open in a shopping centre 9 to 5. And the government's package has also frozen rent increases. So even if your lease had a provision saying your rent goes up by 5% this year, that's been frozen. So you'll get the same rent.
If I owned commercial or retail real estate right now, I would literally be awake at night going, what the hell? Are they, I mean, I know the banks have been amazing when it comes to allowing them to reduce or cease their mortgage payments on their residential properties. Are they doing the same with the commercial and the retail space?
We're getting a bit of mixed reviews about that. Some are, some aren't. It tends to depend on the bank and also how much is outstanding on the loan and what payments are coming in. The main concessions for landlords has been that land tax, potentially you can get a waiver of land tax for this year. And yes, the other thing in favour of landlords is if they can get the bank to put a moratorium on interest and whatnot. So some landlords are in a bit of a squeeze at the moment. I think you're right in saying that the real emphasis has been on keeping tenants operating, because that keeps businesses operating, keeps the economy operating. Unfortunately, we're sort of in a scenario where somebody has to pay the piper. And in this scenario, it's the banks and the landlords.
Yeah, the other issue here too is that there's a suggestion that job keepers, they were looking at having that paid up till September, end of September, yes. And it looks like the government are going, oh, I don't know if we want to do that anymore. So do you think that they will come in, if that's the case, will they come in and review these new changes to tenancies?
They could. The government could look at this act and make an amendment to make the period shorter or recall the whole thing. But we're not sure at this stage, because what the government has been saying about withdrawing JobKeeper has often revolved around what they're calling these zombie companies.
What's a zombie company? Don't run away from that. What is a zombie company?
So a zombie company is a company that is probably not going to make it through this period, and the owners are aware of that, and they're essentially just sitting back getting the JobKeeper for their employees and getting all of these other raft of benefits. And it's not actually supporting business in Victoria, because you've got to remember that JobKeeper is a package for businesses to keep their businesses operating as usual, to roll out the same sorts of service, to get the economy back running. Whereas Job Seeker has more of a focus on people, on the employees who have been terminated. So if you look at it on that basis and say, well, if you've got a company who is not going to make it through this and they're just sitting there on their hands and collecting JobKeeper, it would make more sense to have those staff out on Job Seeker looking for jobs than to have them just sitting in what is essentially a dormant company for the next few months.
Got it. So they're worried about it being...
They're worried about people.
It's a cash cow. They're worried about cash cowing people into a nice little place. You know, I'm a small business. I'm a sole trader. I mean, the job keepers for someone like me as an operator is a heaven sent, because it just means I can keep advertising and doing stuff in my own space. I would hate for them to change or redo that, because, you know, at the property sector, people are not buying real estate. Call me old fashioned.
No, they're not. And that's what we're seeing, that the amount of people putting their property on the market is very small. They're getting snapped up reasonably quickly, I'm finding. I don't know. What are you finding?
Well, Kate, we have Kate on the show, and there is a massive, there's still a demand for those that have sold and still need to find homes. So that won't change. But yes, you're right. The amount of stock that's available is it's very, very limited, and it's only people that have to sell are selling in this marketplace.
Yes, that's what we're finding. Things like estate sales, or like what you said, they've already sold and now they need to buy, or they've already bought and they need to sell, which is always the dramatic one.
Worst time to do it in, isn't it? Are you seeing a demand for, so somebody said to me, divorces and wills. Tell me, I don't want to spend too much time on wills because every time I bring it up, I'm embarrassed because I haven't got mine done yet.
3 years, you still haven't done it.
Jesus. Can you see me bleeding from my chest cavity? So are you saying that are you saying that you as a solicitor out there actively in the space, are you seeing a demand for divorces? Inquiry? People ringing going?
We're seeing an increase in inquiries, very stealthy inquiries, and doing a bit of, yes, people texting and saying, my friend needs a bit of advice. Can they call
my
me?
Friend.
Yeah, I know. So we're seeing a bit of that. A lot of, obviously, because most offices are closed to the public, we're doing that by teleconference, which has actually, or video conference, made this space a lot more accessible to people because they don't have to worry about having somebody look after the kids and come in and conceal where they're going. They just need to, go for a walk or whatever it is. So we are starting to see an increase in that. In terms of wills, they're ticking along nicely. The signing of wills is a problem, but you would love our solution. So we're doing drive-by will signings where we've got clients in their cars and we're watching them from a distance sign, and then we're handing it over and we're wearing gloves and whatnot. And it looks hilarious to the people at the back of our office watching. But it's working practically because you can't say to people, you can't make a will, especially the elderly at this point. We've got a few people who are over 90 coming in to sign this way because we can't wait until lockdown gets, not for them.
Are they amending their wills? Are they spending time with their other significant partners at this stage and going, you know what, you're not getting the house?
Yes,
are you finding
we've got a bit of that going on? We're finding a bit of people saying, well, I was going to leave 50,000 to so-and-so, but I'm now only going to leave them 5,000 because they haven't visited or they haven't called me or anything like that. So it's an interesting space at the moment, but we're also seeing a lot of people getting organised beyond their wills. So, writing their list of passwords and making sure that their bank account details are all up to date and those sort of things. So that's good.
That's really good. I like that. What about no, we were going to talk about statutory demands.
Yes. So what we're seeing an increase in is that you've got products, as a small business, you've got products you're supplying to people or services that you're supplying, and you're finding it hard to get paid. And so you are getting this bigger and bigger list of people who owe you money, and then you can't pay people who you owe money, and it's just this vicious cycle of who gets paid first, basically. So there has been a bit of movement in this area. Companies have been granted some really broad rights now by the federal government. Basically, the government has said, right, where you previously couldn't trade insolvently, you can now, for a limited period, trade insolvent, provided that it's in the normal course of your business, whereas previously that would have been a crime for directors personally. And then beyond that, they're saying, okay, well, if you don't pay your debts as and when they fall due, the normal remedies available to your suppliers are now pushed out. So there used to be this, there is this really useful thing called a statutory demand, that if a company owes you money and they haven't paid you and there's no genuine dispute about debt, then you can issue a statutory demand against them. And if they don't pay within 21 days, that's considered an act of insolvency. And then you can apply to have their company wound up. So it's a really powerful piece of legislation. But given everything that's going on, the federal government has now said, well, no, 21 days is way too short. We're extending that to 6 months. And you can't use this unless the company owes you more than $20,000, when the limit used to be $2,000. So we're seeing that it is more difficult to collect debts from companies. And that really should be taken into account, that yes, you want to keep your business ticking and selling your services and your goods, but if you can't get paid for them at the end of the day, is it even worth having that client?
This is the problem, isn't it? How do you regulate, or how do you trust? I mean, you can't do a blood pack. You can't say, I'll take your kidneys. I mean, it's going to allow some, it just feels a bit cowboys and Indians, doesn't it? Like
It is a little
the
bit.
Wild
So
West.
we recommend that people talk to lawyers if they're in this space, because what we're seeing is that obviously you still want to run your business, you still want to supply goods and services. You just need to beef up your terms and conditions to make sure your ability to recover is good. And you want to beef up your security. So previously you might have just had sort of a handshake agreement, you get paid in 30 days. Now you want to have your terms and conditions, you want to have very tight payment timetables. A lot of people are going down to, you must pay us within 7 days to improve their cash flow. And a lot of people are exploring possibilities of getting from the directors of any companies they deal with personal guarantees and charges over companies.
I love that. I love a personal guarantee all day long.
And a caveat to back that up over property.
And a caveat.
Yeah.
I guess the upshot of this too now, Melanie, is you've got to be really careful about who you actually do work with.
Mm-hmm.
Are you better to constrict who you do work with and just stick to your solid go-to people? And
it's
still,
a tough one.
and still put into the space new, tighter frameworks or contractual agreements. And how do you do that when you've always done everything on a handshake agreement anyway?
It's very difficult, and that's why new businesses starting out should always get this in place beforehand, so they never have to have that discussion with clients in the future. So
how do you say to someone, I've been working with you for 20 years, but guess what, can you sign a new document and an agreement with me, because you might not pay me and you don't have to anymore. Well, you do, but you've got a shelf life.
People can't wait 6 months to take further action. So what we're seeing is that a lot of people are looking at their debtors list and saying, all right, I'm comfortable in carrying X amount of debt for ABC company, but only Y amount for 123 company, based on the personal relationships, based on their payment history and those sorts of things. So they're often approaching clients and saying, right, I'm happy to give you credit of $5,000. However, everything above that has an interest rate, or I need you to sign these terms and conditions, or trying to introduce them that way to essentially say, I can't afford to not have you pay for 6 months.
Oh my God.
It's more your businesses who sell products to the restaurant industry, sell professional services, where there's not necessarily a product, like lawyers like us, accountants, etc. So it is happening out there. It's something that people shouldn't just write off and say, I don't want to have that difficult discussion, because at the end of the day, you're putting your business in jeopardy potentially. And I think if you go and talk to your creditor, you talk to your clients and say, right, I can't afford to do this. We're a small business. I need from you a guarantee that you're going to pay. If somebody turns around and says, I can't give you that guarantee, I'm not happy to do this. If they keep, because there are various options. You can say, can you give me a personal guarantee? Can you give me a caveat? Can you give me a registration over your company? Can you give me a deposit? Can you give me a credit card I can just process at X amount of time? Can we have some kind of bank account that has a bond in it? There are lots of different options there. And if somebody keeps saying to you, no, I can't do any of those things, well, there's got to be a bit of give and take here. And if they can't do any of those, why?
Yeah, well, and the other thing too is that's your answer.
Yeah.
If someone says no, that's your answer. We have a personal guarantee in some of our paperwork that we use as operators.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't sell it, we don't sell. If they don't sign it, we don't sell for them.
Yeah.
We just know that if they that people that refuse to do that are more than likely, without the benefit of future being able to map future, are more than likely going to be the ones that are not going to pay.
Yeah. And look, it's a tough pill to swallow, and each business needs to make that decision themselves and say, well, is it better for me to have this client and run the risk that they don't pay, because they might pay in the future? And it's different for every business, it's different for every client. But I think what we're urging to clients to do is don't just put your head in the sand about it, because there are these options out there. And even if at the end of the day you decide you can't implement any of those options, at least get some advice, think about it. Because people's intentions are generally good.
Oh, you're such a good girl. You're a lawyer, and you just said people's intentions are generally good. And you're a lawyer. Yeah, I mean, you never cease to amaze me. You know that, Melanie.
It's something because I'm having a good day, right?
Oh, God.
Later in the afternoon, I might be, people are terrible. I don't trust any of them.
That's so good. That's so kind of you. So for any of the businesses or any of our listeners out there that want you to guide them through, I mean, that alone sounds like an absolute nightmare. And we were going to talk about bankruptcy, but let's do that next show. I'm going to get you on in a couple of months, because I think what I'm noticing about what we're in is it's changing really rapidly. You just said to us initially at the beginning of the interview, you know, we get new legislation all the time. Why don't we have a conversation in a couple of months? Let's talk about bankruptcy and how that's changed, and anything else that's come up as a consequence of that new landscape. Thank you for joining me, mate. How do our listeners find you?
They can just Google. If you Google Melanie Heffernan, I'm usually the first person who turns up. There aren't too many.
She's the owner of the company, by the way, people.
Or go to our website, which is just selawyers.com.au.
So predominantly in the southeast, eh?
Yes, south, east, and east. So
okay.
But, you know, in these bold days with video conferencing and teleconferencing, we can pretty much be anywhere.
It's a show that you can take on the road. You've been amazing. And listen, this is a great thing. We are working, I'm doing a radio interview with you from my home study. I'm loving this new environment. So it's good to be able to stretch. And this is a great thing about what you do too. You can do it from home anywhere in Australia. God bless you, my friend. All the best. Be safe. And I look forward to hanging out with you in a couple of months.
Sounds good to me.